Good day. Raven Software, like id Software, often likes to outdo themselves. Well, with the advent of Wolfenstein and Singularity, at least they did. After the success of Heretic, they would go on to make Hexen, a game that, in my mind at least, is the greatest game to ever use the Doom engine.
This game is essentially a first-person action RPG. Now, this was by no means the first, because by 1995, there had already been Ultima Underworld and the Elder Scrolls I Arena. But both of those games had confusing controls and gameplay that was rather boring. And also, at that time, I had never even heard of Ultima or the Elder Scrolls, so it didn't matter one way or the other. Now, the game builds itself as being beyond Heretic, and by Telos is it beyond Heretic. Where to even start? For one, the Doom engine has been enhanced yet again, and now everything is just so much more detailed. Your character can now jump as well as crouch, and you can still look up and down. Now, the basic gameplay is still more or less the same as just about any other first-person shooter from this era, but the game is not all about just shooting everything in sight. Rather, it's about shooting everything in sight, finding a key, and then spending another 20 minutes trying to find a door. Now, this game uses a hub-based system, so there really is no linear rush to an exit. Rather, as I said earlier, you'll be looking for items which will open a door somewhere, and it's going to take you a while to find the right door and to find the right item to open that door with.
The game is confusing, to say the least. Since the game uses a hub system, sometimes you'll do something in one level that actually has an effect in another one. So often what you'll end up doing is you'll kill everything in one level, wander around the rest of the hub for another 20 minutes, and then finally figure out that you didn't pull a switch in another completely unrelated level.
To me, in 1995, I thought that was amazing. It just gave the game so much more depth, and it was about much more than just simple shooting. When I first started up the game, I was amazed by the fact that you had multiple character classes. You have the classic fighter, the cleric, and mage. The fighter, of course, is the melee specialist. His starting weapon is not a sword or an axe, but instead his fists of steel. His fists are quite adept at killing low-level enemies, and he can take a tremendous amount of punishment. Now, each character class only gets 3 weapons. 2 basic weapons and 1 special. The warrior gets Timon's Axe, which is an axe that has an energy field around it. When your mana runs out, it becomes just a regular axe.
Now, I liked the Timon's Axe so much that my grandfather and I actually made a replica out of wood. And I would often go around the house doing this, just the same repetitive 2D motion.
Then you get the Fire Hammer. Essentially, it's a hammer that shoots out copies of itself. Now, when you run out of green mana, you use it just like a regular hammer. Now, if only you got a nail gun, then that would be the most unstoppable combination of all time! Or you could just fix a bunch of roofs. Anyway, the special weapon is not just handed to you. Rather, you have to collect pieces of it hidden throughout the game. And it is definitely worth the search. The fighter gets the Quirtus, a broadsword that shoots out green blobs of death. Now, the special weapon uses both blue and green mana and drains both at a very rapid rate. Then we have the cleric, and he gets some decent weapons. Well, actually, only a decent weapon. The starting weapon is a mace, and it is crap, as it does very little damage and has very limited reach. Then you get the eye staff, as I called it back in the day, and it fires 2 very weak projectiles. You can use it at fairly close range, but if ever it ricochets from something, you can poison yourself with it. It is better than the mace, but not by much. Eventually, you finally get the chicken hands, or in all reality, the fire gloves. This is the cleric's best weapon as it has good range and damage, but still, it makes you over-reliant on green mana. Now, the special weapon for the cleric is a cross that fires ghosts! So despite having some of the worst weapons of the lot, the cleric has the most awesome BFG out of all the 90s FPSs. A ghost shooting cross. Yes, the Holy Ghost will make your foes into holy corpses.
Beware of the sacrilege.
In any event, the mage has the best starting weapon, a 22 caliber staff that does light damage but has a high cyclic rate and never runs out of ammo. The mage doesn't get any weapons, but rather he gets spells. Now why the mage doesn't already know them, I couldn't say. Maybe he's like Rincewind and just dropped out of the Arcane University. Now the first spell you get is the ice spell, and it works pretty well against most enemies and looks pretty cool at that. But the best spell by far is the lightning spell. It just looks all inspirational. It's just so epic that it might actually be the greatest magic attack in the history of 90 FPSs. And here's a true story. I played this game so much back in the day that I would sometimes go around making those same motions and making lightning sound effects.
You have to admit that landing on New Caprica was just idiotic beyond all belief, and that's really when the show started sucking.
Yeah, but they could only be in space for so long, and the people really did need a break. You can't be on a ship for years at a time.
Yeah, you can. You know what? You've just got no clue. In fact, psst.
Was that supposed to do something?
Wait for it.
I'm not seeing anything.
Wait for it. What the fuck is that? And now back to our show.
The special weapon for the mage is nowhere near as awesome as the cleric's. It's just a skull staff that shoots firebolts. It's not bad, just horribly generic. The game also has pretty much the same inventory items as Heretic, sans the Tome of Power. It also adds a few new ones as well, such as the Summonable Minotaur, which was formerly an enemy in Heretic. Now one interesting thing to note is the fact that the Flechette items effects change based on what class you play. As the fighter, you use it as a grenade, which is really the best usage. As the cleric, it's a poison gas bomb, which is the worst usage, and as the mage, it's just a stationary time bomb, which is also not that good, but slightly better than the Yeti poison bomb. The music is decent, but there aren't that many memorable tracks, but it gets the job done, and the ambient sounds are top-notch as well, and can really convey a very creepy atmosphere.
The game itself is far, and I do mean far less linear than all of the other FPSs before it. Each level, if you want to really call it that, is really just a part of a much bigger level, and each little tiny level is actually pretty sprawling and confusing.
A big part of the game is solving puzzles, and by a big part of the game, I mean 90% of the game is puzzle solving. Sure, you get to kill a few enemies here and there, but the main thing you do is solve puzzles. And this, of course, works on weird 90s logic, where you have to insert bits of something into another bit of something, or you have to pull a lever on some level that opens a door on another level. And then sometimes you just have to pull a lever and the game tells you that 1/3 of a puzzle has been solved. We don't know what this puzzle is, but 1/3 of it is solved. Now the levels that you play through are quite well detailed, and in this game, stuff actually looks like, well, stuff. A building looks like a building, a dead body looks like a dead body, and some dead bodies are actually destructible. And each level really looks distinct, and there are very creepy moments in the game because of it. Like with the swamp level where the lizardmen actually just pop up out of nowhere. Now as a kid, I did fully complete this game after about 6 months. Really, the puzzles are horribly aggravating. They are just so obtuse. Half the time you'll never even know what to do unless you have just wandered around a level for about an hour. Now of course at the time I played this, the internet was really not existed. Sure, it may have had a few websites here and there, but there certainly weren't walkthroughs for a game like this. And I recently tried to play the game with Timpedia, Mizio, and a fan named Dean Robertson, and out of the four of us, we couldn't figure out how to progress from the first level. And we had internet! Even with the walkthrough it was hard! In fact, this game scarred Mizio for life. Now, one of the things I did back in the day was cheat. I used the visit cheat. Essentially, just type in visit and then the level number. And this is how I got through the game the first time and the second time until I finally made myself sit down and actually play through it the appropriate way.
Like with Heretic, the story for Hexen is actually existent, and thankfully it is not just a rehash of the previous game's story. In fact, it is a direct continuation. Now, the level of story that you get is dependent upon the version that you play. The original PC just had text screens, and the PlayStation 1 version actually has FMVs. Too bad the version on that game sucks completely, but then again, what can you expect? It's the PlayStation 1 after all.
Wait a second, Lotz. The PlayStation 1 is one of the best consoles of all time. And even if you look at all of the early experimental 3D that it did, it still produced some of the greatest innovations to gaming visuals ever.
If any console is even close to the level of awesomeness that is the PC, it's the N64, since they didn't have to have any graphical downgrades. Besides, while the PlayStation 1 was still doing 2D, the PC was doing 3D, and even then that was old news.
The FMVs actually give out more story than the tech screens ever did. Apparently, the second Serpent Rider, Korax, has corrupted the rulers of the planet Kronos. Although the FMVs in the PSX version call it Hexen, but hey, it's the PSX. We just have to let it go, because of course anything on that system has to be downgraded just a little bit. N64 forever. In any event, it's up to these three bad dudes to take him down. You have Bardus, the fighter, Daedalon, the mage, and Parius the cleric. And once the first FMV ends, well, that's pretty much all the story you get, because as you go through the game, the story is not fleshed out at all. Although, Korax will trash talk you from time to time, which for the mid-90s was pretty awesome. Moving on from the story, the enemies for the game are decent, and they are thankfully not reused from the previous game. Now, the basic enemy that you will fight is the personally named Dummy Two Heads. Now, in the game, it's actually an Etin. Now, they have 2 heads and very dumb AI. They attack you with a spiked mace and are only really a threat in large numbers. You then have the Centaur, and he has a shield that can block your attacks. And if you throw a hammer at it, it just bounces off and can hit you. They can attack in one of 2 ways. The generic ones have a sword, and the upgraded ones have a magic missile attack. And like in Heretic, there is an enemy in this game that freaked me out. It was the Dark Bishop. It's the chanting that's just really, really creepy. Now at this point, I was too old to get as scared as I did when I played Heretic, but the evil chanting still put me on edge.
At the time, the game was fairly popular and definitely went way beyond Heretic. The inclusion of 3-player classes really gave the game a lot of replayability, and the sprawling and confusing and very obtuse levels really made the game have some staying power.
These days, you can easily play Hexen with Z-Doom or Skulltag, and I highly recommend playing Hexen with Skulltag, because even though this game is over, what? Almost 20 years old? Ugh, I feel old. In any event, it's a great co-op game.
No, it was not.
Really? It wasn't? That's some of the best co-op of all time. If you don't like it, go play a crappy Diablo 3.
I seem to recall you like that game too, quite a bit.
Fine, then go play your crappy Dead Island.
Okay, fine, since I bought it for both of us, that means we can both play it.
No!
The co-op for Hexen works really well since it is slightly easier to solve some of the more obtuse puzzles with more people around. At least it won't be as boring when you have to walk around the same bloody corridors 20,000 times trying to figure out what bit goes in another bit.
If you didn't get a chance to play Hexen the first time around, I highly recommend that you track it down and get a copy, because it is definitely a very entertaining game. And so this is General Lotz wishing you good Mountain Blade, good Gothic, or whatever makes you happy.
Oh, god damn it! Fuck you, you asshole! I hit my fucking head because of you! Fuck you! When you compare it to its competitors, the Saturn, which honestly I couldn't tell you much about because I never saw much of it.
No, it was not! Wait, so what am I saying this to?
Me!
No! I know you! What am I saying it in response to?